Welcome to the Coffee with Karen podcast, a weekly chat show discussing everything from holistic health to current affairs from a mental, physical, and spiritual perspective. Get your weekly cup of positivity with a sprinkling of woo-woo.
Fantastic. So we are live with this week's Coffee with Karen, a cup of positivity with just a sprinkling of woo-woo. So each week I get to interview a wonderful array of guests, either they're coaches, consultants, therapists, or healers in some way or other, and talking about whatever topic they want to discuss from either a mental, a physical, or spiritual perspective. So your host, my name's Karen Roberts. We own a Mintwave radio station where we provide a platform for coaches to get their message heard, and Raising Vibrations podcast network, because that's just one way of getting that message out there to grow your audience and get more sales. So this week, my guests, is it Sara or Sarah? How do I pronounce your name? Sorry.
Sarah.
It is Sarah. Okay, so Sarah, if you'd like to introduce yourself, share with the audience a little bit about who you are, first of all, and what you do.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Karen. It's Sara Roach-Lewis, and I am a feminist business strategist. And I am delighted by your lovely accent. I'm Canadian, so I don't have nearly as interesting an accent.
That depends, doesn't it? It's down to perspective.
Yes, indeed.
So what is it that you actually do? Who is it that you help specifically, and what problems do you solve?
Sure. So I work with mostly with women who are service-based business owners. And essentially what I do is I help women who want to grow their business without feeling like they need to work sort of 24/7. And I do that by helping with the business side of business. So sort of there's two things that I generally help with. And one is we often go into business for our expertise, and we're not experts in business. So that's where I come into play, and really specifically around planning. So teaching people entrepreneurial planning and how to bake growth right into the DNA of your business. So that, and when I looked at, what does it take to grow a business? One is a good plan. And the second is a solid self-care practice. So I'm all about the woo as well.
Good. Well, it is all about the woo-woo, really, isn't it?
It really, in the end, it's always about the woo. Yeah.
It gets dressed up in the mental and the physical. And so, yeah, I totally agree. So many people become an entrepreneur, but like you say, they don't have any business expertise, because do you find that, if people are used to having a job,
yes,
they go in on the Monday and they know exactly what's expected of them if they've been there for a while, because their manager, their upline, whatever it is, the owner of the company has all these strategies and processes and procedures all in place. So they just get the job done. There's no question about it. There's no procrastinating about what to do. They just get on and do it. But all of a sudden, it's interesting that you say that, because people all of a sudden, it's their business and they don't seem to know what to do next to actually get the clients.
Which is completely fair, because, as you say, one, we are not taught about entrepreneurship. Well, certainly not in the country I live in. We're not taught about entrepreneurship and as an option. And so often, particularly with the audience that you have, we are going into business because we have a desire to help people, and we have a clear expertise, and that's what we want to do. And that's where we shine, is when you are a coach, a consultant, a therapist, a healer, you are shining in that piece that you do in the business work. And so where things get tricky is the working on the business. So that difference between, and we hear that all the time, well, you need to work on your business. Well, what the heck does that mean? Because to your point, when you start your business, or even when you've been in business for a few years, much of the focus does need to be on sales and marketing, because that's where in that early stage of business, that does need to be where our focus is. And so what I teach people is how to do the planning to allow for that to happen, and a recognition that for most of us, our business size, we don't need a lot of planning. So often what happens is people think business planning, well, that's for companies like Apple and Microsoft and, Walmart. They do business planning. But in fact, we all need to do business planning. And the joy is at our stage, we don't need that much of it. And what I tend to talk about, so bringing it back to, um, the holistic part of ourselves, to me, that's what's most important, is that we are growing businesses that we love. I had a client very early on, and I was very much in like doing sort of operations at that point. And she said to me, so everything was a mess, basically. They weren't paying themselves. The owners weren't paying themselves. They had a big staff. No one knew what to do, because everything was in a bit of a mess. Their accounts receivable were out of control. And she said to me one day, all of that. And like, it's a nightmare. This whole business is a nightmare, but it's my nightmare, so lovingly. And I thought, oh, dear God, I don't want to create a nightmare, and I don't want my clients to do that either.
No, absolutely. I mean, I suppose the thing is you mentioned the sales and marketing, and I totally agree. So many people come into the coaching space, and if they're into holistic health, they very good at giving and not so good at receiving. They just want to do the thing. They just want to do the helping people. But look, anybody in business is in sales, whether they like it or not. So they may as well learn how to do it in a way that resonates with them, because there's so many different methods out there. And it's just finding the right thing that's going to work for you and your audience.
And I think that that's where it comes back to being in alignment. So in the process that I walk my clients through, the first thing that we do is we do some visioning. And so we really want to look at, where do you want to be in 10 years from now? And I always find it fascinating. I have 2 kids, and they date us so nicely, right? In 10 years from now, I will have a 25-year-old and a 28-year-old. I mean, I can't even fathom, because I'm in the teenage years, right? So when we vision out, where do we want to be in 10 years? Are we building a company to sell? Are we building a company that we want to, just grow with us? Or are we building something that we want to hit 7 figures? Or are we building something where we want to, sort of be a comfortable, what is comfortable for you? What are you growing toward? Do you want to have staff? Those are all those questions that we ask in the vision. You don't need to know how it's going to happen, but we're really visioning that out. And part of the visioning process is, so what does the next year look like for you? And what would you like your revenue target to be? And so people often, particularly as you say, us in the, us helpers, struggle with sometimes that concrete. And I'm not asking you in that process to say, I want to make, my target is $200,000 this year, and this is how I'm going to do it. It's, I want to move toward $200,000, because as we know, when we put those intentions out into the universe helps us out. It is not to say that we don't have to do our part, but we do our part, the universe does its part. And I really have seen over and over and over again, when we put those intentions into the world, that is a key component to hitting those goals that we want. So that's sort of part of it, is in the beginning is really looking at alignment and that visioning piece. But then what we do is we really dive into your business. What are you doing that you love? What are you doing that you hate? How do we make sure that you do more of what you love and less of what you hate? And one of the things, the stats are 86% of women-owned businesses make less than $100,000 a year. And yeah, right? Like, that's that's 86% of women-owned businesses are struggling the hardest stage of business. And what I focus on is how do we get you through that as quickly as possible? Because that's when you really get to do the work that is in alignment with what your soul wants you to do.
Yeah, sure. Do you think the reasoning behind that? I didn't know those stats actually. That's quite shocking. But the way I see things is that quite often people, it's their whole mindset with having their own business. What they've actually decided to have is just buy themselves a job.
Yes.
Because it's a one-man band, they're trying to do everything themselves. And I would say it's probably very, very difficult to get even to 6 figures by yourself if you're doing absolutely everything by yourself, because there's so much to be done, right? This is why these companies do so well, because they have teams. They have a sales team. They have somebody dealing with social media management. So I suppose if people really want to build a business that's going to give them the freedom rather than being surgically attached to their phone, which
Yes.
they tend to be, it is, how would you encourage people then to really look at their business to say, look, for you to go to that next level, something needs to change, right? Because there's only so many hours in a day, and there's, you know, you've got to deliver your program, right? How many hours is that going to take just to deliver it? Then you've got to do this. If you're going to do the sales calls, you've got to make time to do the sales calls, to sell the programs. Then whatever's left is for the social media management or dealing with notifications, emails. You know, there is so much. So I get it why some are struggling so much, because there is going to be only so much they can do before burnout hits, right?
Yeah.
So what would you say to any listeners that are like, you know, they're doing okay-ish, they're getting by, which can be dangerous, right? Because when we're too comfortable, you know, but to go to that next level, how do they know when is the right time to start outsourcing certain parts of the day-to-day that they, like you said, they don't like doing?
Yeah. I think that's where the visioning comes into play as part of it. So there's a whole lot of things. So one, we get really caught up in outsourcing and making it much harder than it needs to be. And I think we get really clear, like there's a really great visual. So if you can imagine this, you know, a kind of a diagram, and, you know, in the top, an axis. And we really want to focus on building our business, doing things that bring value to the business and energy to the business owner. And sometimes we need to do things that bring value to the business, but kind of suck the owner's life out of them. So for me, I would call that bookkeeping, right? I really, one of my very special skills is teaching people how to make financial, you know, solid business decisions based on their own financial information. So I think numbers are very important. And I am not your entering receipts into a QuickBooks kind of gal. I would rather poke my eyes out. So honestly, so the very first thing I outsourced was my bookkeeping. And we tend to think about the expense of that. And so this is where we want to have a little bit of a mind shift. So when I started my first bookkeeper, I think she was, say, $35 an hour. And she cost me really, when especially, and even now, I still don't spend a ton of money. Like our businesses don't really require a lot of financial management, like detailed financial management, but it's really important. So for, say, a couple of $100 a month, that it's not. And so where people get stuck is, I need all of those dollars. And of course you do, because you need to pay your mortgage, you need to pay your bills, all of those sorts of things. You need to pay your rent, whatever it is. But if we can reframe that to that $200 or $400 a month that you're spending on the things that you hate doing in your business, what kind of money can you generate in that time that's been saved? So I think that's one, is shifting it from how much this is costing me to what are the opportunities that are presented as a result of that.
Yeah.
The other thing is, in the early days, so I used to do a ton of consulting. I still do some. And so I would do strategic plans for organizations, and I would come back home with flip charts full of notes. Well, I asked my mom. She's a lovely human. And in the early days, she typed the notes for me. And yeah, I paid her, but I paid her a very small amount of money. So who are the people in the early days? I really needed social media management and I couldn't afford that. So I did a trade with someone who needed the kind of business support that I provide as she was doing her business. So being creative about how you outsource and recognizing that it doesn't need to be a ton of money in order for you to see a significant return.
So it's getting clear. What I'm hearing from you is getting clarity on the lower, I shouldn't say the lower, but the tasks that you need to do each day. I would say get cleaner.
Yeah.
Sort your house out.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that was one of the things I was going to say. 100%.
Yeah,
get a cleaner. It doesn't need
up.
to be, it does not need to be directly associated to your business. Get a cleaner. My kids have to be driven to the bus every day. And either my husband or my father-in-law does that. One summer, my kid their job was 30 or 40 minutes away. I hired someone in my business, and part of their job was to drive my kid to school. Because you know what? To their job, because I could make so much more money in that hour than what it was costing me to pay someone to drive them.
Yeah, sure. So it's being very particular on if you've only got so many hours in the day to get the work done. And I suppose that's why, it's funny, isn't it? Nobody likes the planning. So, I hate it. I hate the numbers, but we know that it's got to be done. Not that it's not going to be just done once, but when you do it, it actually frees you up, even emotionally, mentally, because you know what needs to be done every day. Yeah. And again, a bit like having the job, you can just then get on and do it, rather than when you're not quite sure and you haven't really prepped, which is what I see. People are just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping it sticks.
Exactly.
But then I can imagine that must feel so stressful, because they don't actually know where their next client is actually come from. If there's no process in place, how do they know? But when you have prepped all of this, you can, it's a lot calmer, right? And then you don't push the sales away because you're not desperate for them, because you're following your process. So it does make so much sense. But yeah, I agree. So many people come into this, and not everybody has a business background. Cool. I certainly didn't.
Most people don't. Most people don't. And that's okay. And I think what happens is, when we talk about those things, so part of it is getting through those early stages of business as quickly as possible. One is, outsourcing. Another is the planning side. And then the third is the confidence. And so those two come into play really nicely. So often when we're looking at the planning, my clients fall into two buckets. We all fall into two buckets. We either love planning, but we don't really know how to do it in an entrepreneurial context, or we are the classic entrepreneurial squirrel brain, hamster on a wheel. There's like 1,000 ideas happening all at the same time. And they've gotten to where they've gotten to through sort of grit and hustle and determination and their own, work ethic and attitude. But at some point you're like, this is exhausting. And so what I love when you said, it's freeing, because it really is. And often people will say to me, having a plan or, sort of making that strategy, it's constricting. And it's like, actually, it's the opposite of that, because the kind of like entrepreneurial planning for this stage of business needs to be flexible, needs to be nimble. That is the joy of being small business owners, is that we can be those sorts of things. So we don't want to take that away. But what we want to do is create a plan so that we know what we're measuring against, and it takes some of that fear away. So again, going back to those numbers, one of the things that I teach in my program is, so we do sort of a visioning piece, and then we do an assessment, and we look at your business in particular. And part of that is the numbers. And so often people will say to me, I need to get my numbers in order, and they're terrified of it. I have my spreadsheets are called playing with numbers. And I have these very simple spreadsheets that will allow you to play around and see, how much do I need to be charging? Here's a very simple spreadsheet that allows you to track your revenue, the money coming in the door, so that you're not freaked out. You can very clearly see, this is my booked work. This is my work that, I've had a sales call, but it hasn't come through yet. So you're able to really track that. And that's where confidence comes, when we feel like we know what we're doing in our business. And often we don't feel that way. And often people are ashamed of that because they feel like their business is a mess. Well, I've looked under the hood of many businesses, and they're all a mess in some. We just clean up one area and then we move on to another area that's a mess. So like, it doesn't really matter. They're all messy in some way, shape, or form. But we have this idea that everyone else's business, they've got these elegant solutions and it's all beautiful. Well, no, you're believing their sales page or their social media feed. And we all have things that we're not confident about, or we are worried about in terms of running our business. And once we name that, the fear goes away, right? The fear goes away. And we learn about it.
Yeah, love that. I mean, you mentioned there about having the confidence, and it just goes to show that how you feel is an essential part of all this, because if you are stressed and you are anxious, and then you start to doubt yourself, and if you don't know where you're at with anything, you're not measuring, what gets measured gets managed. So if you're not tracking things, how do you know if you're on track or not towards your goal? But if you know that, whatever happens, if I'm having so many discovery calls a day, over the month, I'm going to average out about this. And then you can breathe, because it's not so desperate. Love that. So I know you're a speaker, right? You're an author. What's your book? Where can people buy it?
So my book is called She Rules: What You Didn't Know Is Holding You Back in Business. And it really speaks to exactly what we were talking about. And I wrote this book because I kept hearing women talk about not feeling comfortable and not feeling confident in their business, even though they were the ones that created it. And so because my background is both working for a feminist organization and doing strategy, like so much of my background is around looking at big picture, really big problems, and then how do we work together to make systemic change to solve those problems. So when I looked at business, if we pull back far enough, what we see is that business is actually created by men, inspired by military strategy, and supported by women at home doing everything else. No wonder it doesn't feel comfortable for women. And so my answer to that is, she rules. We make our own rules. So that's really what I did, is looked at how do we look at building businesses that work for women and rejecting so much of what doesn't. And so I use a feminist business strategy, which You don't need to be a woman to employ a feminist business strategy, because none of us, I don't think, in this day and age are interested in running businesses that have that military inspired command and control, competition at all cost. We're competing for finite resources. That's not the way we want to run our businesses.
Absolutely. There's more than enough for everyone. And this, I get it. It comes from a fear. It comes from a fear background, this scarcity mindset. There's not enough. I mean, yes, you're a like-minded soul. We're all about collaboration. There is no competition. Everybody, and what I have found, even interviewing people for this show. So this has been going just over 2 years now, and or just coming up for 2 years. And what I found is, I can receive their bio and have one perception. And until I get on and ask them the questions, what I realized was everybody is serving a different segment of society. They've got a different niche. They're solving completely different problems just because they've got the title coach, and they've got different tools in their toolbox. And it was really just sort of, there is someone for everyone. Like years ago, 20 years ago, I would not have even heard really my last coach. It just wouldn't have even, resonated with me at all, because it was so far from where I was back then. So I needed the coach that I needed back then, which, you just realize there's somebody for everybody. Everybody's got different ways. And, look, hello, I've got pink hair. I'm hardly going to attract corporate clients, which, guess what, is okay. I'm absolutely fine with that, because I attract my tribe. And I 100% agree, when people come out of this competition mindset and go into, come on, collaborate. There's enough room for everybody. Everybody needs, other coaches need coaches. We're probably the best.
We're good clients.
Everybody's looking to improve and go to that next level. I'll never stop having a coach.
Me either.
I think that's just the way the mindset of people are. So love what you're doing. So so you help, you're focused mainly on women. Are they in this sort of area? So coaches, consultants, all sort of service providers.
Service providers. So
And
absolutely in that area.
If they're feeling stuck, and where can they find this book?
So you can go to She Rules, which is my website. So sherules.biz. And there you can actually download a couple of free chapters, or you can order it on Amazon. So that's probably the easiest place. But if you go to sherules.biz, then the link to either buy the book or download the book is right there. And I think for me, the key thing is, sort of really looking at that planning, and also, I just really resonated with what you said. And back in the day when I first started, and I was really worried about sales, and I didn't know how that was going to work, and I felt like I was being salesy, I saw a meme. It's amazing how profound memes can be sometimes. But I saw a meme that said, someone out there is manifesting you. And that, right? It just helped me reframe that from what I provide, the confidence that people get from working with me, the increase in their revenues that people get from working with me is profound. And it's like you say, it's not for everyone, but for the people who are out there thinking, man, I wish I could get through these bumps. Man, I wish I could make more money. Man, I wish I felt more confident. Man, I wish I understood more about my business. I am that person, right? So it's really for certain people. And I just love that idea of shifting it, not from me selling, but from that idea that someone is manifesting. So someone is manifesting you, and someone is manifesting me, and someone is manifesting someone else.
Love that. And what you just said there about that shift, turning it around, I think that's massive, because I feel that so many, and I get it because I had the same issue, right? Oh man, if I knew, God, even 15 years ago what I know now, my goodness. Because I hated sales. I was very much, build it and they will come. And that can work. Like you say, if you're really, you've got a good work ethic and you go. That is how we built we had a fitness studio in the Algarve for 8 years. And oh my goodness, if I really understood sales back then, but we just thought, our reputation would get around and they would come. And it was because of our perseverance that built it. However, that was a terrible business model because it was built around us.
Yes.
Then you can't escape it. And it was a real eye-opener that if you're not building a business that you can maybe eventually step back off and be the CEO of your business, like really all we've done is bought ourselves jobs. And that was it. And it was maybe to a slightly bigger level, but still we were very trapped. And I do see that so many people seem to be in that place. So for them to go to that next level, it just needs maybe just an outside look. I know for me, I found that because I was so emotionally involved in my business, I needed someone to take an outside view, a bird's eye view at it, to give me, good advice and veer me in the right direction. Because sometimes you can get, especially when people are working from home, right?
Yeah.
They're behind their computer and they're so emotionally involved in it anyway that sometimes that can stop them making the right decision, or they procrastinate and change. And having that outsider's look to say, have you thought about this? Sometimes that's all you need, right? Somebody to bounce an idea around to say, well, have you thought of it like that? I mean, I'm terrible for I'm getting better, but very much I can overcomplicate things, right?
Yes.
And often what I've found is what I've needed to do is peel it back, simplify.
Yeah.
Because otherwise things can get overwhelming. And it's interesting that you said earlier about the, some people it's because they're going to push it and go with the work ethic. It's the same with, I think my people know I can be a little bit over the place. If I was tested, I'm sure I'd have ADHD, right? So I can be a little bit, but I call it my superpower. Again,
absolutely.
It's how you frame things and how you perceive it. I know I like doing different things. So doing one thing and the only thing wouldn't suit me. It's understanding that everybody's slightly different, right? In the things that they like doing.
And I think that's where a good plan helps, right? Because you know that you need, and I'm the same. I always say, I work with a lot of creatives as well. And so there's this think outside the box. That doesn't work for me. Give me a box, give me some constraints, and then I can be wildly creative within that box.
Right.
So that's what works for me. And I think that's where, that good plan comes into play is a recognition that what works for you doesn't work for me and doesn't work for someone else. And it might not work for someone else. And there are these key things that I think we can do. And, so if I look at the way that I wrote the book is I have what I kind of call the front matter, and I talk about why, why it's important and, unpack some of these stats like that 76 or 86% of women own businesses, and those numbers are, significantly lower if you're a woman of color. And indigenous. So really looking at kind of setting the stage for why. Talking a little bit about feminist business strategy. So really unpacking what does that mean? And then really rolling into these rules. So for each rule, and I really struggled with that because I don't like rules. Kind of a story that I told myself is I don't like rules. I'm a bit of a rebel. And here I am writing a book that has rules in it. But part of that is it really is about making your own rules. So I've written these ones, and then in each one, I have exercises to help. So that first one, the rule number 1 is align with your vision and values. And so so I talk about how to align with your vision and values and a recognition that we all drift. So what happens when you drift away? And so I give activities and little kind of strategies that you can immediately employ in your business in order to pull you back or identify what some of the things are. So to your point, I think, coaching is incredibly important and has been so valuable to me in a variety of capacities in my life. And so I'm always going to encourage people to do that. And the book is a great place to start because it is designed to literally open at any page, read it, and be able to apply that in your business today. And because we don't have time for foolishness.
Yeah.
We don't have time for bullshit. We have fluff. We just need to figure out, like, what is the problem? How are we solving it today? And moving on. And that's really what I tried to accomplish within the book.
Awesome. And it's a great place to start then. Start with the book, because I know, I get it. Some people, when they're starting out in business, they might not be doing it full time. They might have kids to look after. They might be having a part-time or even full-time job and trying to build it on the side. And so there's, like we said, there's only so many hours in a day. And if you do too much, you're going to burn out, right?
Absolutely.
But I think sometimes, and again, I can only go from my own experiences, when you do sometimes realize what it's going to take to get there, the overwhelm can sink in. In the beginning, we're all sort of unconsciously incompetent. We don't know what we don't know. And then we move into being, okay, now I know how much there is to do. And that overwhelm people can like step back into safety because, I've got to do this. If I'm going to do this, I've got to do this and this and this. But we all go through that stage. That's just a learning phase. And if people understood that if they just keep moving forward each day, they will eventually become consciously competent. They might not be able to remember everything that they're doing, or it might be taking longer. But again, if they just kept going, they would become unconsciously competent, which is where everybody wants to be, right? Because we no longer have to struggle and think about what we do. We just get up in the morning, open the computer and get on with the job, just like, when you're an employee, right? So anybody can do this, but I just feel that so many people step back into safety when I think the enormity of if they're going to, if they're seriously going to build a big business, can seem, again, it's all perception, right? Because when you get there, it's like, well, it's easy. But it wasn't easy when we were going through that phase. And there's nobody, if anybody says they didn't go through that phase, I'd be a little bit skeptical, because it's just, when you learn anything new, you go through those phases, right? And then, but everybody wants to jump from A to T straight away, and it's a process, right?
It doesn't quite work like that. And I think that's part of the challenge these days, is that we have a lot of folks, particularly in the online space, where 0 to 6 figures in 3 months, and here's how you do this quickly, and here's how this happens, and and the fact of the matter is, it does take work, and good strategy and good support will streamline that and smooth it out for you. I also think that it can be very difficult, and people get stuck easily in that, in those harder stages of business. I think part of it is overwhelm, and part of it is fear, and part of it is confidence. Like, that's all wrapped up. And, we are really taught as women in particular not to value ourselves, right? Society really encourages women to be good mothers, good partners, good employees, good employers, but we don't necessarily get a ton of messages that we need to put our own needs first. And I think that then it can become really challenging because that can be where that lack of confidence comes from. One of the easiest ways to make more money is to charge more. And if you've not reviewed your pricing in the last 6 months and increased your pricing in the last 6 months, I would strongly encourage you to do that today. And generally speaking, women undercharge because we undervalue ourselves, because we are taught to undervalue ourselves. So part of what we also need to work through in this is, what of this is ours to own, and what of this is actually ours to reject, because it is those patriarchal societal pressures that are put on us as women, and we don't actually need to own those. So I think there's so much of what we need to do in the business context, but in the world is, it's the learning and the unlearning. We need to unlearn a whole lot of things.
100%, 100%. And what I did hear you touch on as well is about the self-care. And I think that I didn't really used to get, because I could get into I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to, because we are, again, we have been conditioned to, like, if you were to sit down or even go and have a relaxing bath, you almost feel guilty because you're taking time out for yourself. But it's actually the flip, isn't it? The flip side of that, that's what you need to do, because, all the old sayings, you can't give from an empty cup and all of this, the sayings are there because they are true. And actually, if you did take 10 minutes, 20 minutes, God dear, how dare you, 20 minutes going and having a nice bath with aromatherapy oils and some salts, and to actually quieten down. I use this a lot. I say that the best ideas, I get in the flow of my work, and I get more productive when I have been practicing my unthinking. Rather than I would think before, I've got to think, I've got to control this, and I've got to remember to do this, and I've got to do this. And actually, I could sit at the computer and not really get much done. Whereas when I have taken time out for myself and I've practiced my unthinking, when I come to the computer, boom, 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 get the work done. It's so, because we've been so conditioned that the opposite is true. And like, I suppose, just like you were saying at the beginning, this sort of military style, you've got to, be on time, you've got to be at work early, be at your desk really early, you've got to do. It's all the do. Think, do. Whereas when we take a step back, like you said earlier, love that. It's a lot of it is unlearning, unthinking. And then when you come to do the action, it comes to you, because everybody knows what they probably, some people need guidance, but intuitively, if we were to listen to that intuitive voice more, we'd actually go and get the job done.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. And one of the challenges that I kept bumping up against is with with business owners, with leaders, is I'll make sure my staff do that. I know, but I don't have time for that. And so part of what I talk about in the book is, let's reframe self-care as business care. Because here's the thing, for most of us, and all of us, for most of us, we are the most important asset in our business. So if we were going to buy, if we had a trucking company and we were going to buy one of those great big transfer trucks and then never put oil in it, never send it in for regular maintenance, that seems like a very bad business decision. Absolutely. So we need to take care of our business assets.
Yes,
You need to
love
take
that.
care of yourself because you are a business asset. And sometimes reframing it that way in the beginning is easier for folks, because then it's like, I don't, because it's so easy to walk down the path of like, I feel selfish. Well, actually, if you want to, again, you are the business asset. And when I think about my own life, so I have a chronic illness, which means that I really have to take care of myself, because the implications are pretty significant if I don't. And sometimes the things that we do look selfish, but they're really not. So I referenced before that my kids need to be driven to the bus. We live in the country. They need to be driven to the bus. And before the pandemic, and they need to be at the bus stop by 7:15 in the morning, which is like punishingly early. Before the pandemic, my husband and I shared that responsibility. And one of the joys of the pandemic, because there were a few, was realizing that early start in the morning, I get dizzy spells. And so that early start in the morning really correlated with me potentially feeling unwell and, being dizzy. And so I realized when the kids were off school for all that time, I really relished in this slow start. And so, and it was like, wow. And a few times where I needed to have this quick start in the morning, it was like, oh, that does not feel good. So after my kids were going back to school, I'd said to my husband, I'm tapping out. I can't do the early morning bus ride anymore, which objectively from the outside looking in looks very selfish. And so I have a great husband who was like, yep, sure, no problem. He of course continued to forget because he's a normal human. And, a few times would say, are you taking the kids? No, remember? So by like November of that first year, it was just really baked in that I don't drive the kids. So that could look selfish, but in fact, that shift makes me a better mother, a better partner, a better person to live with, and a better entrepreneur, which puts food in their mouths.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, all this, because again, I suppose that's going back to it's my way or the highway. There is not one way to do it. Some people are really great early birds. Others are night owls. And if we all just accepted that we are all different and celebrate the differences and work with it, so you found a solution to that, which is awesome. Because if you're not going to be, selfish has got such a negative connotation to it. I don't see it like that. If you're not going to be selfish and take some self-care, how can you then be selfless to your clients and delivering on the goods? The whole thing comes together. So yes, some people would be better in the morning. Some people would be better working later in life. Let's just go with what feels good to us, what resonates with our better way of doing, because we're going to be more productive. If you're going to be forced to get up in the morning to do, maybe the result of that doing won't be as good as if you got out a couple of hours later, refreshed, taken care, and then actually did a better job of whatever it is you need to be doing. And I think that is the message, isn't it, for everybody, that you know what, there's nothing wrong with you. Nobody's broken. Nobody's doing. It's like whatever works for you, and find a formula that's going to fit into your lifestyle and that's going to get the best out of you. I think that's just proof in the pudding there with what you've just said there. Fantastic.
And that's it. Self-care looks really, that self is the first word in that, right? It's individual. So self-care looks really different for different people. That what we've just talked about, for me, that is self-care. Is, making sure that I am not on that early morning rotation. So self-care can look really different. And I think it takes a long time, I think, to really settle into this idea in entrepreneurship, like we all start businesses for some variation of flexibility and freedom. And then we end up with creating a job for ourselves, right? Like you talked about before. So really honing in on what does flexibility and freedom look like for you? Why did you start, or whatever it is, why did you start this? And then being like really leaning into that. And for one person it's just going to look different for everyone. And being okay. So one of the other things that I talk about in the book is I can't remember which section, but being okay with people being wrong about you. And so, that again, going back to that same scenario, there are a multitude of people who could judge me and my decision to not drive my kids to school in the morning. And I don't need to explain that to anybody. You can be, and it is not easy. It is not easy to be okay with people being wrong about you. But when we focus on what is in alignment, building a business that aligns with our vision and our values, then a byproduct of that is being totally okay knowing that you're not everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah.
And that is just okay.
I think that's massive advice. And I've tried to tell my girl. I mean, my girls are older. So I've got a 23-year-old and a nearly 19-year-old. And if I could get them to get this now, right? It's okay. What other people think is not your business. And because we have been conditioned, we all want everybody to like us. And it's so freeing when you realize that some people will, some people won't, and it's all good. It's all okay, because that's the beauty of the world, isn't it? I'm absolutely fine with that. But obviously that comes with, I'm 50 now, so,
Right, yeah, me too.
Might have been a slow learner, but, I'm getting.
Yeah,
But
you get there.
I think that's massive, and I get it. It's not easy, but when we get over that and do things, and like you say, we've all got, I'm sure people would judge me, and we've all got our different values and different beliefs over a multitude of things, and that's why it's just essential, isn't it? Everybody's got to just do what they think is the right thing for them at that time, and it doesn't matter the rest of it. I totally agree. I'm with you there on that one. So for the listeners out there, if they can't see your details down here, so if they're listening on the radio, this is going out on Mintwave radio station. If they can't, how do they get in touch with you? I know you said sherules.biz. So
BIZ. Yeah.
BIZ.
So sherules.biz. The other place I really love Instagram. So I'm S Roach-Lewis, and that's ROACH, like a cockroach, unfortunately. So, you can sort of find me there. I really enjoy Instagram as a place to hang out, and, obviously my website. But I do encourage folks to, find my book. I have a workbook that's attached to it as well, because I do believe that, the learning, we really need to integrate it right away, right? That's how and so there's a workbook that you can download that's got, things that you can do right away to grow your business. And what I have created in the book is something for every stage of business, right? So I mostly work with business owners who have been in business for a while, right? Like and they want to make that, it's when you feel like you need to get to that next level. So if you want to hit that 7 figures, if you're at 6 figures, and if you're at, 100,000 and you want to get to 250, that's really where my sweet spot is. That's what I do best, is when you've been in business for a while, you know what you do, and you're kind of still struggling to make it all fit together. That's kind of where I come into play. However, with the book, I created it in a way that there's something there for everyone. And I really, I'm very proud of it. And it's gotten great sort of feedback from business owners who've read it, because it is designed to be that soft place to land when you're having a bit of a tough day, and, a wonderful place to hang out and celebrate your success on those days where you are happy and thrilled.
Love that. And I love what you just said there about, because people don't do it. We're so conditioned. It's all our conditioning. We really need, like in the Matrix film, we need to plug in, download and upload and upload, because people are, they don't sometimes, and this is why it's so important, like you say, to prep and plan and monitor, so that you can look back and see how far you've come. Because people, especially here, I would say the British, stiff upper lip and all this, we don't celebrate our wins. Man, that's exactly what you need to do, because we go the other way. Things don't go our way, right? And that's what can hold people back. If things didn't quite go as planned, that can have more of an impact. Whereas they might have had a fantastic win the week before, and they've got complacent with it, and they've not celebrated it. So yes, celebrating every single win is going to help you attract more wins.
And well, that's it. And it's going to help you see what's working, right? Like that's why we do a planning process, and an iterative planning process is to see what's working. And I am far more interested in following the breadcrumbs of your wins than, obviously we need to look at the things that didn't go well, particularly if the arse really falls out of something, we need to look at that. But when we're looking at baking growth into a business, when we're looking at growing a business that you love, well, what are the things that are going well? What are your wins? Let's just figure out how to do more of that. And that, it's pretty simple, but that's how you grow a business that you love.
There you go. Fantastic advice. So, to the listeners out there, so if anybody's feeling like they're a little bit stuck or gone a bit stagnant in their business, and maybe, know that they can get to that level, but don't quite know how, need a little bit of help, then get in touch. Start with a book and see where you go. So are there any more books in the pipeline?
Yes, I think so. They're in the bubbling and squeaking phase right now, but yes, I actually really loved it. Lots of people ask, and really, writing a book was really enjoyable, except when it was agonizing, and that's it. So I'm totally down for doing that again someday.
I've never. It's just the one thing that has never. Just yes, it's not the thing for me. I've got no desire to write a book,
but it might be, right? It might be.
I don't think so. I mean, I've written some ebooks, but that's as far as it gets. But I don't know. It's funny, isn't it? And this is the beauty. Everybody's got their own desires and goals, and everybody's different, and there's no right or wrong, right? And which is why I suppose. For me, the platform has been, I knew I wanted to create a directory because of this program, because of interviewing all wonderful people like yourself and realizing, oh man, they're doing this and that. And I get excited about it, right?
Yeah.
And so I knew I wanted to create a directory. I didn't know how I was going to do it. And weirdly, it was, during my practicing my unthinking, I'd even spoken to the lady who I've only just handed my website over, because I sort of did it all myself. How we could, what sort of plugins or what sort of software we'd need to create this. And then the owner of the radio station just messaged me and said, "Do you want to take it over?" And I said, "Yeah."
Okay.
So it was never really the plan. But actually, when I look back, I realized, yes, it was the whole plan, because I wanted to have a platform. And again, some people write books, some people want to start a podcast. So to have now our podcast network, it's like, well, here we go. We've got our directory on the website. If people want a podcast where they can interview others, then it's a platform for that. There's not one way. And when people get away from this my way or the highway. There's so many different ways of growing your audience, of building influence within your audience. And you've got to do what you think is going to be the most fun, right? So for you, it's writing a book. You enjoyed that process. So I love it. So thank you so much. Wonderful conversation today, and lovely meeting you even for the first time. I had no idea what this was going to be about. So thank you so much for your time. And to the listeners, I will be back next week with a coffee with Karen. Bye for now.
Welcome to the Coffee with Karen podcast, a weekly chat show discussing everything from holistic health to current affairs from a mental, physical, and spiritual perspective. Get your weekly cup of positivity with a sprinkling